Hi, this is JSex with another video. Now, I apologize for not making a video in a while. I've been rather busy with work as of late. And as you know, I do YouTube just for the fun of it. I don't make any money off of it. I think it's good just to work on my English skills and just to have some fun information and talk about watches, of course. Now, today's watch features the Rolex Datejust model 16014 Oyster Perpetual. This is a vintage watch made from the 1970s to 1980s. Features the classic Datejust size at 36 millimeters. This has a beautiful white gold fluted bezel. And the beautiful thing about this is it's really going to dance and shimmer in the light there as you move it or light moves around it. Look at this kind of this radiance, this very shimmering or glimmering, just a very handsome looking watch there. So moving on, this particular one features a plexiglass crystal. Once again, this is a vintage watch. I think it's a great touch. This is a vaulted crystal whereby it's not domed, but it's certainly raised a fair bit up and then flattens out. And of course, you can see there the Rolex Cyclops. I'll show you the other side here. There's the Rolex crown, of course. So a very great looking watch. This particular one has a tritium dial with tritium hands. The movement is Rolex caliber 3035. Now, the great thing about this movement, it's the first Datejust movement to feature the quick set as well as a fairly high beat rate. This is a 28,800 vibrations per hour, so it's going to be nice and accurate. COSC certified as well as quick set date. As you can see, that date there has this nice open 6. The 9 is open as well. I think it's that beautiful vintage aesthetic of the numerals here, which gives us so much charm to this watch. Now, the important thing about this guy, like I said, quick set date. If you're looking for, let's say, a vintage watch or want to get into Rolex as a brand and don't want to spend a ton of money, I think a vintage Datejust is a great option for you. Now, the Datejust model prior to this did not feature the quick set date. So to change the date, you had to pull out the crown in advance, literally, day by day, hour by hour. So quite tedious task to set the date. I think this is the great combination of vintage aesthetic, vintage year certainly, but a fairly robust movement with some modern conveniences. You have the quick set date, you have the high beat rate, COSC certified. Now, very accurate for a vintage watch. This particular watch runs about 4 seconds fast per day, which I think is just great. So this is a timeless, classic, iconic design by Rolex. 36 millimeter diameter, and the lug width is 20 millimeters. Now, this particular watch I happen to have on a custom leather British racing green strap that I had made because I thought it was a great color to kind of play with. The great thing about Datejust like this, I think of it as a blank canvas watch. Now, it came with the Jubilee bracelet originally, but I put that away in a box just to try out some fun with different straps and so forth. Now, as an example, you can play around with that. So you can add something like maybe a dark blue strap with some contrast stitching. I'll slide that in there as an example. And then I have a different strap. This is a Shell Cordovan. It's kind of like maybe a caramel brown strap. Let's slide this guy in there as an example. So a great way to really change the overall look of the watch without too much money and fairly easily. Now, the great thing about this, it features these lug holes, so it makes it easy to change your strap or bracelet without getting your watch all scratched up. So quite easy to change those. Now, around the same time, 70s and 80s, there was a different Datejust model. That's the 16030. That particular model featured an engine turn stainless bezel. I think it's a great option as well if you prefer that. Myself, I just like this white gold. It gives it such a classic design. I think the fluted bezel for Datejust is just kind of the iconic bezel for this. Now, of course, today you can buy a smooth bezel, as you know. But look at this watch. It's just beautiful. Vintage. All the vintage charms and the beautiful aesthetics without the hassles of a watch which is too old. Now, some of these vintage watches you're going to see, they're not very wearable. They're overly delicate. They're difficult to service, hard to find parts, and you're afraid you're going to break it, scratch it, or mess it up. Now, this is a fairly robust watch. Now, I would not abuse it or take it diving per se, and still, be careful with your watches, obviously. But, the movement is very serviceable. It's a fairly robust, fairly shock-resistant movement. So bear that in mind. This is a vintage watch you can wear every day if you want to. I just love watching this and kind of moving this in the light to see how this, different angles. It's just a beautiful watch. I can look at this, for quite a bit and not get bored of it. Anyway, so the great thing about Datejust also in this vintage, there was a variety of dial colors you can choose from, even some dial textures or patterns, as well as different ways of hour markers. This features a tritium dial with tritium hands and your basic just kind of, stick indices for the hours here. I think this is a great watch to consider to get into vintage. Now, things to be aware of for a vintage watch, any vintage watch, but in particular for a Datejust, you want to make sure, A, it's as original as possible. So this did feature the plexiglass crystal. Sometimes you'll see them with glass replaced, so try and get original if you can. Look for any scratches or damage. You want to make sure that this bezel as well has nice sharp flutes, or the corners anyway. You don't want them rounded, because that means it's either been worn too much and damaged or overly polished maybe. And look at the lugs as well. You want to make sure they're fairly uniform in size, so it means they were not overly polished or poorly polished. Additionally, one thing to look out for is your lug holes. Now, in a watch that is over polished, you'll see there is not much space between the lug hole and the edge of the watch because all that metal was cut away. So make sure there's a decent amount of space between the lug hole and the edge of the watch there. Maybe a better way to say it in English, but I apologize. But you know what I mean. Make sure that hole is not too close to the edge is the summary, because it means it's been ground down over the years and over polished. And for me, with a vintage watch, even a modern watch, I'd rather have some of that, honest wear and charm, as opposed to it being overly polished and look just too, artificial, shall we say. So a great watch to consider for a vintage watch, or to get into the Rolex brand as your first Rolex watch. I think this is a timeless watch you can really keep forever. This is that classic Datejust design, which you can still see today in a modern watch. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching. This is Jay Sykes, hoping you have a nice day, if possible. Bye.